Welcome to another UTS Startups Confessions. My name is Victoria from UTS Startups, and every week on the busiest street corner in Sydney, we have somebody from our UTS Startups community to come in and talk about their journey and share all the secrets for their entrepreneurial success. For this week, please welcome me in welcoming Liam from Skillry. Thanks so much for joining me, Liam.
Thanks for having me. I'm so happy to be here. It's been like around a year since I wanted to do this, so I'm happy to be here.
I'm glad we could get you in. So, Liam, just to begin with, could you tell me a little bit about your startup?
Absolutely. So we're a sports coaching marketplace. We're trying to make it more affordable, available, and accessible to get coaching online. We just recognize that there's such a big gap between want to get one-on-one coaching and the affordability and accessibility component. We did a survey with around 1,000 or so university students, and we just recognized that 89% of them found that time or money to be a barrier. So we started with bouldering as our first sport, and you can send a video of yourself doing a climb that you struggled on, connect with a coach, and get feedback in a fraction of the time.
That's so exciting. And I'm sure with the Olympics that are happening right now, I know for sure that at least I am really inspired to get back into doing some more sports and get better at it. So love this startup idea.
Absolutely.
So I just want to take it back a little bit. Could you tell me a little bit about who you were before you started this startup?
Yeah, absolutely. So back post high school, did a bunch of internships for a couple of companies. And then during high school, I had to do an internship, a business internship. So I was looking around, and funny enough, one day after we completed a subject, our group was like, hey, let's just go out, have some drinks. And funny enough, it was only me and one other guy that decided to meet up. Everyone else sort of ditched. So we're like, hey, let's just have a beer, let's have a conversation. And then 10 minutes in, we're talking about both our experiences. The guy's name was Richard. He is the co-founder of CryptoSpend, well, now WayX, after the rebrand. And we just talked about our experience and what we wanted to pursue passion-wise. And I said, I've got an internship I've got coming up. And it changed from having a beer with a mate to full-on interview mode. And he's like, so what's your prior experience? And I was like, yes, I priorly worked at, and after around 5 minutes, he offered me an internship, and I was like, oh, great, yeah, that makes things easier. After that internship, I always had ideas to want to do startups, but I always thought you need 10 years of experience behind your belt. You need to be in the industry, working, having all these connections. But they asked me, have you got an idea? And I was like, yeah, but can't do it, right? And he's like, why not? We're in our mid-20s, we gave it a go, and look at us now. And I said, you make a good point, that's it's a fair idea. So I always had the idea to do Skillry because post-COVID, me and my mates decided to just do all the sports we could, right? It was we're locked down, we're like, let's do bowling, let's do 8-ball, let's do all these bouldering, let's do all these sports that we're missing out on. And I'm a competitive guy, so when you start to lose, you're like, damn, how cool would it be to get sick of coaching and just whoop their asses, right? But I looked online, the options were expensive. A guy wanted to charge me $250 for bowling. I had to go to Parramatta. He said he's not going to be available for a month. I thought, surely I could just send them a video and get feedback. And that's where the idea started. I ended up pitching to my co-founder, who was my best mate from high school, Michael. And it was interesting. I just had this really terrible piece of paper I was scribbling all these ideas on, and I was like, what do you think? What do you reckon I should do? I was waiting for him to be like, yeah, okay, I'm going to pass on this. But he immediately started firing back ideas, and that's where the idea was born.
Amazing. That's such a great start to your story. So you kind of identified this idea. What led you to realize that this is, what was a light bulb moment that made you realize, hey, this is an opportunity that I could really pursue? Yeah,
absolutely. We did, because obviously we found this as an idea ourselves, and I always believe with startups, you've got to scratch your own itch first, but we wanted to make sure that this resonated with other people. And like I mentioned earlier, we did 1,000 or so surveys, and we also cold called a lot of coaching places, so table tennis centers, just generally coaches that we knew from friends of friends, and sat them down and did an interview. And one of the most interesting answers we got back from a question was when we asked, have you ever tried coaching online? And the general answer was, I wouldn't know where to start. So we figured there's obviously a big gap for coaches where they want to do this, but to set it up themselves, require them to maybe create a new Instagram account, set up a Zoom sort of process. it really was quite extenuous. So we try to make it simpler for them, but also for learners who just want to get better, who understand that they got this passion, but there's a huge gap in what they can financially give away and the time commitment they can do. And now we're trying to shorten and bridge that sort of component there.
Amazing. And what has your first few years looked like?
The first year was a bit rough in the fact that you don't know what you don't know. So we didn't know the language we wanted to code in, we didn't know the framework we wanted to use, the cloud to host with. Everything is just a complete blank start. And it's a little disheartening at times when you just feel like there's like no progress being made, but at the end of the day, you're always one day ahead of like, okay, I've got this new thing I need to learn, here's what I need to learn, you tick those boxes. Sometimes you go down a dead end, but we just found that after a year, the growth started becoming exponential. What started to take like a week or a month to do, now it's taking us like a couple hours. So now that we've invested time on ourselves, we haven't outsourced any of the work, we're not paying any external workers, we can now just hop on the code, fix a bug quickly, and get it done. So we're glad we took the time investment. Maybe we should have done the quick approach of doing a no-code solution. Maybe that was the route we should have taken previously if I were to do my time again. But this is the way we've done it, and happy to launch the way we have now. Amazing.
And on that, I heard that you are about to launch.
Yes.
Can you tell me a little bit about how that's all going?
Oh, it's been quite the week. We've had a lot of pushbacks, especially from Apple. So we actually submitted to the App Store 2 weeks ago. But Apple is quite relentless and stringent in what they allow. And they're not exactly the best of the review process. There's not like a, let's review everything, give it to you, fix this, happy days. It's a, we found one issue, let's give it to you. Okay, cool, we found another issue, let's give it to you. So it's this back and forth, you're generally waiting 24 hours to 48 hours before they finally reply. And a couple of times they said, oh, we need a delete account functionality. This is an example. Delete account functionality, we gave that to them. They deleted the account. They said, this account doesn't exist to test with. Well, we can't do that. They did that once, but not twice. So those sort of things, a little frustrating, but that's sort of like outside of our control. Of course, the stock market had the biggest crash in Japan. You know, there's a lot of things. Great timing. There's a lot of things that you can't control. But again, you just focus on what you can. And we've had some partnerships lined up with universities now.
Oh, great.
And also we're in talks with sponsoring a bouldering venue, so quite exciting.
Amazing. That's very exciting, and I love bouldering, so I'm really excited to eventually use your app. So you do seem to be kind of juggling a lot of things.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about what's the secret ingredients to helping you succeed in creating this app, especially pre-revenue?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a lot of patience, because right now I'm working part-time at Avenue Bank, which is the newest bank in Australia. I was doing studies, but I've graduated a year ago, and I've been working on Skillry. So you lose a lot of time, and they always say there's like the 3 factors: there's time, social, and sleep, and you obviously end up sacrificing one along the way. Generally it's sleep. But what I like to do is just make sure that I don't get too mad at myself. There's going to be times that you don't feel like there's been progress. You have a couple steps back before you can take a couple forward. It's just being patient with yourself, being patient with the process, and understanding that you've got to look back in retrospect and see the progress you have made. Because you've obviously still got this goal that you're looking ahead of you for, but understanding that you've made these steps, you've worked for it, and the steps you made previously have made it where you are today.
Yeah, absolutely. Being able to sort of compare yourself to your past self and just see what you've done in a short amount of time, really.
Yeah, exactly.
It's really impressive, actually.
Thank you.
And so on that, can you tell me a little bit about how Skillry has transformed from the initial ideas you had to where it's gotten to be able to launch now?
Yeah, absolutely. So we thought we were going to start with like a tier system, subscription system. There was a lot of things that we were sort of playing around with, but there was 2 big components that really sort of the levers we sort of tried, because a lot of people, especially in like 2024, AI is the big thing. We discussed, should we do that rather than a marketplace? But the 2 things we found, especially with subscriptions, is there's a lot of subscription fatigue. I think a study came out recently and found that 68% of people are now getting subscription fatigue. So we wanted to be more of a Fiverr model, where you just pay for the climb you want to get feedback on. And additionally, with AI, it's great. It's eventually something maybe you want to start carrying towards, but you just can't beat that one-on-one capability with the coach. Getting that connection, getting that like motivation, the compliments, just feels so much more surreal when it comes from an actual real person. And like, we're not trying to, when we've talked to bouldering venues, a lot of them are scared we're trying to be similar to Uber, to taxis, we're a substitute. We're not saying we're a substitute, we're an alternative. I feel like one-on-one coaching is great. You need to do it sometimes. Having that, I've done, as part of my market research, some bouldering lessons. And what I found was, sometimes I want to climb and I'm like feeling a bit stuck, and they can touch a muscle. I could be like, I've got to activate that. So there's obviously still a demand for that. But what we do is we can say, hey, I don't know the beta. I don't know how to get up this climb. Give me feedback. I don't want to pair with a lot of budget, and I don't want to have waiting a couple months, because sometimes a lot of these ones take a long time.
Right. Well, this is really, really exciting. So I would love to hear more about what you think the future of Skillry is.
Yeah, so we're starting with this very simple business model of send the video off, get feedback, happy days. Both parties are happy. That's what we want to start with. It's a high growth model because of the cost it takes and the time commitment, and also very few supply can handle a lot of demand. But eventually, we want to get to the point where we want an interactive masterclass. So we like what masterclass does, where it's got this great video where someone explains the concepts, the basics, and leads you through an entire process. And you go through the courses, you answer quizzes. We love that component, but something that we found, and especially this is apparent with Duolingo, a couple of studies have looked at this, where you can teach all this content at you, but if you don't practice it in real life, you don't learn the right syntax for the language, you don't learn, there's some colloquialism that you just avoid entirely, right? So we're trying to make it that you get the entire masterclass, and then you also have that interactive component where a coach will review what you've produced after that. So you're learning what happens, and then you're actually making sure what you've learned is translated into your ability. So that's where we want to get to eventually afterwards.
Amazing. And I really think it's interesting, kind of the sea of AI startups coming out. You've kind of, decided to make it much more of a one-on-one, not in person, but one-on-one experience so that people can actually get that.
We might facilitate in person. We've had some requests saying once we've got this whole online method, why not also facilitate the offline if they really like each other? So that is something that we can potentially facilitate eventually.
Ooh, that's very exciting.
That's all about startups, seeing where you want to pivot, seeing where you want to go.
Yeah, amazing. And if you were to look back at and do it all again, what would you say would you do exactly the same, or would you change anything?
I think given what our circumstances were, where we were studying, we obviously need income to pay the bills, we took the approach where we're like, okay, we're just going to passion project, learn what we need to learn, and in the past year it's become more of like, okay, this is a business, let's start making things happen. If I were to do my time again and I had less of a time commitment, I would have, like I said previously, done maybe ShareTribe, which is a no-code marketplace, potentially used Bubble just to create a bit more of an MVP that I could have just tested with the market to ensure that what we're trying to produce has legs and people want to pay for this product. But we've seen in our beta testing that that's the case, so we got lucky in that aspect. But that's what I would have done in hindsight. But again, when you're first starting, you don't really know what you're doing.
Yeah.
You're learning, watching a whole bunch of YC Combinator videos and being, all right, cool, that sounds like a good idea, let's pursue that. So I'm happy the way things have turned up now, but the advice I give to people now who've talked to me, I say, try no code, try to get something as fast as you can out, test that, and then eventually, if you feel like no code's limited, you can pivot to a bit more of a code solution.
Right, so kind of start up with something like a lower fidelity MVP, test that out into the market, and then see if you want to invest in it.
Exactly that.
Amazing. And so we've talked a lot about your startup. I would love to finish off by asking you a bit about your own experience as an entrepreneur. So can you tell me a little bit about what you've taken away from this whole journey?
Yeah, I've recognized, especially with the story of like this week, I was a bit sick, we have the stock market going crazy, Apple keeps pushing back on us, we find issues in the code and we have to quickly fix it. There's a lot of things that happen externally that is outside of your locus of control. It's just a matter of making sure that you focus on your internal locus of control, what you can now do to make a change. You can't get too swept up into like, oh, this coach said this person's interacting with the platform. You can solve that, you can talk to them, but you just gotta make sure that you understand what you can control and don't worry about what you can't, and just let it come as it is, because that's when burnout happens, when you try and fight against like the storm that's you can't fight against. You got to win the battles you can.
Yeah, well, you've definitely had a pretty big week with the stock market and everything happening the week of your launch. So I'm sure that's really going to prepare you
Hopefully
for...
tomorrow everything comes out and everything's finished.
Yeah.
Apple's finalized the reveals and all that. So
No huge world collapse.
yes,
please.
hopefully no apocalypse, please.
And looking back, what advice would you give yourself at the beginning of your journey? Or if you could provide any advice to any budding entrepreneurs who are also thinking about starting their own business?
I think just start. Like the biggest thing that I was grappling with when I first started was I don't know how to code. I don't know how to do this. I was stuck in that a bit of inertia of like, this is just too surreal of a task to even tackle. Where do I start? It's just a matter of just, even if it's the littlest task, taking each day, day by day, and making sure that you've got your objectives, you tick those objectives off, and that's your win for the day. And then those sort of cascade to the bigger picture where you start getting those smaller wins. It's all just the butterfly effects of what you start passing down that starts to make the wins really happen.
Yeah, so small steps every single day, no matter how big, and then eventually you'll look back and you're like, wow, I just created something.
Absolutely, that's the way to do it.
Awesome, well thank you so much. In a moment, I will be turning off the live stream and passing it over to our in-person Q&A. So this is an opportunity for anybody inside UTS Startups to ask all of the juicy questions to Liam about his experience. And this is also a reminder to anybody who is watching online or through live stream that to come down to UTS Startups every single Friday to be able to chat to our amazing startup founders and ask any questions. But anybody online, thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to welcoming you into UTS Startups sometime. So please again, join me as I thank Liam McEvoy from Skillry.